Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and to talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I want to talk to you about emasculation, something I've been waiting to talk to you about for a long time, actually, and really have been wanting to address, because modern feminism and other aspects of society have been emasculating men for decades now, even going a step further than that, too, and trying to masculinize women. Now, this is not just a theory. This isn't just rhetoric. It is evidenced by studies showing that testosterone levels have been slowly declining for some time, something I'm sure you've heard about. It's been covered by the news over and over. So in this video, I'm going to expose the ways in which society is emasculating men and trying to turn them into women so that we can fight against it. And the first and foremost way that men have been emasculated is through the removal of positive, strong, masculine male role models, which is done on two fronts, both in real life and in the media. Okay, so this is done obviously on TV sitcoms and other TV shows and movies where our male role models in the media are being emasculated, and these stories are part of our modern mythos, and they have an effect on society and our culture because they're part of our cultural programming and social conditioning. All right, but this is also done in real life as well, where you've seen that a lot of strong, positive male role models have gotten demonized by feminism. A lot of the male role models in Hollywood are getting emasculated by the woke culture of feminism and the LGBTQ community there. And even many politicians have gone woke as well. And we're seeing less positive masculine male role models in politics. And then the next way that men have been emasculated that I want to talk about is the removal of fathers from children's lives through no-fault divorce and a biased court system that only allows men to see their kids like every other weekend. Basically not at all, leaving the mother as the primary influence over the child. And you're probably wondering, well, how does this emasculate men just by taking away their legal power over their kids? And while that does feel emasculating to be legally powerless as a patriarch of a family and have the power of being the patriarch taken away from you, which you should have, but where men are really being emasculated here is through mothers then being the primary influence on their boys and influencing them not to be traditionally masculine, but to be feminine. And then when they don't turn out all right, and things go wrong, they call it toxic masculinity, because if the boys are actually behaving like, in feminine manners, doing the social manipulation and everything, then yeah, that's toxic behavior. When it comes to men, they'll get called out for it. But when it comes to females, that's, something they don't get called out for. They get allowed to be manipulative and toxic, right? Because women are being empowered by feminism, not men. And then most of the rest of the influences over boys are female. The teachers, the people who run daycares, babysitters. There's all sorts of female role models and influences in boys' lives. But are there other male role models in real life for the boy? I mean, there's public figures, I suppose, but there aren't really male role models in the life of boys that are close enough and play an intimate role enough that they are teaching them how to be men. I mean, you take boys away from their fathers, you surround them with women and female influences, and try to remove their masculinity. So that is a huge way that men are getting emasculated in massive quantity through the no-fault divorce and the family court legal system, and it basically splitting up and destroying the nuclear family structure, and then having boys be raised by women and influenced entirely by women through the education system, something I talked about on another video. If you haven't seen that, check that out, linked below. All right, so basically while boys are developing and going from boys to men, whereas we used to have traditions that would instill masculinity, the code of masculinity, or some sort of man code, or teaching, or life lessons, or wisdom from his father, and then there would be some sort of initiation and rite of passage from boyhood into manhood that basically caused there to be this transformation in him and this maturation process, right? That's all being taken away. Boys' manhood is being taken away. They're being emasculated systematically by women. And so since it's so systemic, it's on such a huge scale. It's culture-wide, all right? So that is a huge way that men are getting emasculated, is that women hit us during our developmental period by being our primary source of influence. And then another way that we're emasculated is that boys and men are taught that masculinity is toxic and the patriarchy is oppressive, and that the only way to be good is to renounce these things and become more feminine and feminist. I mean, boys are getting it again in the education system. Men who live in certain countercultures in the U.S. get it, like Hollywood and certain towns and places that are very liberal. And then, of course, there's certain corporations that are very liberal that are basically giving men this emasculating propaganda, telling them that their masculinity is toxic and trying to make them more feminine. And then another really sneaky way that men are emasculated that you might not have ever thought about is the female influence over men's fashion. and basically the female fashion influencers and gay fashion influencers as well, who are part of the feminist LGBTQ community, attempting to turn men into these metrosexuals and getting them to wear more feminine clothing. Something that I'm against, which I talked about in one of my last videos on male image. If you haven't seen that, make sure you watch that. But I've noticed that in recent years, like ever since the metrosexual term was coined and that concept of being metro came out, the influence of the fashion industry has been emasculating to men and making them more effeminate. And then another source of the emasculation of men is the rise in sedentary careers that is making men physically weak, docile, basically unfit and often overweight, more and more especially, and thus also low in testosterone. When you are unhealthy and or unfit and or overweight, you are going to be low in testosterone. All right, you need exercise to stimulate testosterone production. So living a sedentary life is not just unhealthy, it's emasculating. So think about that. Nutrient-rich foods such as meat, fruits, vegetables, and certain grains that were once people's primary sources of nourishment have now been replaced by estrogen and calorie-rich foods lacking in nutrients, such as dairy, processed food, fast food, junk food, and sugary drinks and other sugary food like pastries, donuts. And this has caused men to become basically chemically imbalanced and low in testosterone, high in estrogen, docile, weak, and fat and unhealthy. So basically the modern lifestyle and diet is emasculating to men.
Are you sure to take your daily dose of red pills consistently so that you can stay out of the matrix? The red pill is a medicine that only works if you take it in the right dosage and never miss a dose. One missed dose of red pills can mean turning back into a blue-pilled limp dick simp under the sharp heel of the evil feminist matriarchy. So make sure you are subscribed and that your subscription is set to all so that you never have to miss one of your daily doses of the red pill, because I'm releasing hot new red pill content every single fucking day just to make sure you don't have to. So make sure you will actually get notified when they are released, because you know that YouTube doesn't want to show you things that don't align with its liberal leftist feminazi agenda, and it shadow bans content creators like me who use free speech to speak out against these politics and stand up for the rights of the oppressed masses of men like you and me. And if you want to help me keep fighting the good fight, please donate using the PayPal link below so that I can keep this work alive, because I simply cannot do it without the support of viewers like you. And be sure to spread these messages and share these videos with any other men you know who could use a nice big dose of red pills.
But then women also behave in a way towards men and treat them in a way that is very emasculating these days as well. Women have become the dominant gender, feminists have instilled a matriarchy, and women are very controlling to men in their lives, which they don't do graciously and in a way that supports their strengths, but is emasculating to them, and which seeks to undermine our strengths and our masculinity, and to weaken us and make us more subservient to them. Women are constantly disrespecting men, shaming men, and doing other emasculating things with their language, all of which is actually programming men's brains to weaken us mentally and make us feel less masculine and less manly. What do you think phrases such as, you're not a real man is meant to do? It is meant to emasculate men and break down their sense of masculinity and their gender identity, something that would be seen as very bad and wrong in the LGBTQ community, which is a feminist organization, but which feminists and women in general love to do to what they call cisgendered men. They love emasculating us, but they would never allow there to be talk about who is a real woman or who isn't. That is a faux pas, but they are allowed to do that to men. They love emasculating us. And when a man has emotional issues from all of this and seeks out therapy, the therapists will only emasculate them further. The APA has issued a report declaring traditional masculinity is toxic, even though I've read it and what they're talking about is not traditional masculinity. It is machismo, or having a dark triad personality, or being, a narcissist or sociopath, or potentially some other type of personality disorder. It is basically a man who is behaving badly, what is what they're talking about, right? And yet they're calling it traditional masculinity, which it is not. But what they're trying to do is campaign against masculinity, and they're seeking to emasculate us men. And therapists are always suggesting that their male clients adopt more feminine ways of thinking and acting. I know because I've been to plenty of therapists, both men and women, which I need to see because of how being raised by a single mother who was a feminist really fucked me up, and how much she sought to emasculate me. So I've gone to therapists who then don't support masculinity either, and seek to emasculate you as well. Again, both men and women. There's even a therapy workbook that I bought that suggested that men imagine themselves as a scared little girl. I was like, what the fuck? It didn't say on the cover that this was a workbook for women. No. So psychologists are literally attempting to feminize them. And feminism is trying to teach people that gender is just a social construct, which, I get in some sense is true, because we have this thing called social conditioning and cultural programming that I talk about. And there's nature versus nurture. So yeah, there is a nurture part of it, which is what they're talking about. There will be social conditioning and a sort of social construct about what in your culture is considered masculine and manly, something I talk about. But they are using that concept of gender being sort of relative to turn men into women and promote transgender ideology, and literally in the physiological sense turn men into women by convincing them that they are really women, more female than male, and basically brainwashing them into castrating themselves. Feminism and the LGBTQ community want to physically emasculate men, and not just men, but boys, and they are doing this by infiltrating the media and the education system, and thus being able to affect social narratives and the social conditioning and cultural programming that I'm talking about, and brainwashing people with woke political propaganda, trying to get them to think that they're doing the right thing, the best possible thing by following these messages. And yet what they end up doing is getting not only more and more, but younger and younger people to castrate themselves and try to change genders, because they want to turn as many people into the opposite gender as possible. And they are literally starting to see some success, especially in certain areas, which is really scary. I mean, this is some Hannibal Lecter shit here. And speaking of brainwashing, let's talk about cell phones and social media and how they are basically like a form of social engineering and are re-socializing men and causing them to communicate and act more like women, using broken English, miscommunication, emojis and GIFs instead of words, taking excessive selfies and becoming obsessed with their self-image, and having a social life that is more like that of a teenage girl, right? I literally have watched a culture of men go from being able to communicate in that sort of rational masculine fashion to becoming much more boyish or even girlish in their communications because of how social media and cell phones have re-socialized them. So it's sort of been an emasculating influence on male behavior. And then another source of emasculation in the media is female dating advice to men. And not even just in the media, but like anytime a female gives dating advice to her male friends, they basically instruct men to be more subservient to women in different ways. And many men have already been influenced by women in their lives to that end as well, and already believe in this. And so female dating advice is usually just a gross regurgitation of the cultural narrative that men should supplicate to women and be submissive to them, and how romantic that is and such, So that is very emasculating to men, and it's not even realistic. It doesn't even work like that. It is just, again, feminine propaganda meant to emasculate men and make them more subservient to women. So now that you know about what emasculation is and all the different ways that it's happening, you'll be able to recognize it whenever you see it and stand up against it in whatever ways you can. And you can resist yourself being emasculated and feminized and fight back against feminism and be masculine. Now, this is not to say that men cannot do anything that has ever been traditionally thought of as a feminine-oriented thing in any culture, like cooking and cleaning, right? That is not to say that a man shouldn't have feelings or express them, and it's not to say that a man should be afraid of ever acting in a way that might be perceived as feminine, doing things like wearing a piece of clothing that might be perceived as feminine because it has a more feminine color to it, right? Or having any sort of thoughts or feelings he thinks aren't masculine. The answer to emasculation is not to renounce anything that might be considered remotely feminine and just adopt adopt a completely macho attitude, right? Start overcompensating and everything. And in fact, as a masculine man, you especially do not need to worry about these things. A masculine man can be in touch with what in psychology would be called the feminine side without it feminizing him and his masculine identity, because that is what he is. He is a man, so he is masculine. So in the next video, that's what I'm going to be getting into.
That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix and the matriarchy controlling it and learn everything you need to know about female on male sexism, get your copy of my newly released book called Misandry Exposed, on sale now for a special price that won't last long. So check it out by clicking the link below. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.